Hear the good news for this Easter morning as it is recorded for us in Mark, the 16th chapter. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" And when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified? He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. The Gospel of the Lord. I don't know if you've been wondering about that sermon title. Considering all the legislations that's been passed and things that have changed over the last few years, I went to the Urban Dictionary to find out what the first definition of the word stoned may be. It didn't do a Bible scholar any good to read that it had nothing to do with what happened to Stephen. No, stoned. The mind altered to the point where you can blankly stare into whatever catches your attention. To illustrate, I was so stoned I didn't notice the movie was in French. And I don't speak French. I kind of think that we come into Easter stoned. We have expectations for what this day may be, and it's all around us. If you go to buy a card to send to somebody, it's probably about the renewal of the world with spring and flowers blossoming, maybe a butterfly. We know that spring break anymore suggests a destination for vacation more than holy reflection and worship. Easter. It's one of those holidays that we know makes sense to the church, but does it really? How do we feel coming into worship today? We know the story. Can it astonish us as it did the women at the tomb? Or do we kind of blankly stare at whatever catches our attention, numbed by whatever happens in our lives, wondering if the stone can be rolled away and this Jesus that we talk about bring us hope and good news and new beginnings today. Stoned. The women feared that they would not be able to get into the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus, which was hurriedly buried the day that he died. The sun would set, the Sabbath would begin, there could be no work. Joseph of Arimathea had offered his tomb. It was a new tomb. It had not yet been used. And he had to have some money, that Joseph, because the kind of tomb that he had was hewn out of the rock, maybe right out of the mountainside. And then there was a groove that kind of sloped downward, and a big slab of a stone, maybe 6 feet by 4 feet, was placed in that groove so that it could be pushed down the groove across the entrance to the tomb. Not everybody got that kind of treatment, but Joseph had it, and he offered it when Jesus' body was taken off the cross. So it makes sense. The women would have some concern. If the stone had been rolled and the tomb had been sealed, how are they, 3 women, going to push that back up the slope to get into the tomb? And they find it's already rolled away. And when they go in the tomb, hoping to anoint the body of Jesus in a final, devoted act of love, they meet up with somebody who shares this news. You seek him. He's not here. He lives. He has gone before you. Go and tell the disciples and Peter, just in case Peter, who denied him 3 times, doesn't think he's still among the disciples. Go and tell them that he goes ahead of them, and they will see him. I need that news today. I'm kind of in that haze where I look at the events that are happening around us, and my attention is drawn to them, but I can't make sense of them. I'm stoned. I'm numb. I can't focus on good news when I hear about the flight of a jet that carries babies in their mother's arms, high school students excited about an adventure into a foreign land and now ready to go home and share that adventure with their family. 150 people, including one whose spirit was so crushed and broken that he deliberately flew the plane into the stone, the rock of the mountain where it disintegrated. I don't understand what happened this past week in Kenya. People of faith that rise up against each other and try to destroy each other. I don't get it. I don't even get it when it happens here at home. People of faith trying to destroy one another by what they believe is so right that they have no respect or love for each other. Back in the 60s, Bob Dylan sang a song and said, "Everybody must get stoned." Some people thought, hey, he's with it. In fact, most people thought that. Back in 2012, when he was interviewed by the magazine Rolling Stone, Dylan said, "Well, you don't know if that's what it meant. Maybe you need to read the book of Acts. Back to that Stephen story, aren't we? Where somebody would be stoned for what they believed. And the words of Jesus start making sense. Blessed are you when they persecute you and destroy you for my sake. But it seems like we all are stoned. It seems like we're all kind of in that place where we really need this news to be good, to embrace us. And whatever is keeping us from getting to the risen Jesus, or even the proclamation that he goes ahead of you, trust it, believe it. He'll be there wherever you travel, and oh, there's not a disciple among you left out in the cold. Jesus wants us to know good news today. That he has the power to roll back those stones that keep us away from him. And then he uses us. He uses us as stones in the kingdom. So if we're going to be stoned, let's be stoned this way. When he's tempted and the devil says to Jesus, you haven't eaten for 40 days. Just worship me and I will give you bread. And Jesus replies, I can tell you that by the power of God, I can make bread out of these stones if I needed to. Do you wonder why there's still hunger in the world? Inequalities? Pain? Suffering? It's not because it's God's will. God has provided everything necessary. And then he says to us, be generous with what you have received. You are the stones that God is changing into bread for the world. You are the ones who can stop hunger. You, my people, carry my resurrection and my life. Do you wonder when at the same time that Dylan was singing that song, others were singing songs about civil rights, and we look at the headlines now and we think, have we gotten anywhere to be so ugly? And Jesus says to us, you are the stones that I build into my temple. You are living stones. And the church that I have is no longer confined to buildings. Those big stones that my disciples gawked at in Jerusalem, I said those temples can be destroyed and rebuilt. But I am building you to be my body. And you will be the church that goes out and claims love. And you will reach the broken in heart and in spirit, and know that even though death will come suddenly, I am there. My spirit is among you. And you reach out to those who are dying. You reach out to the ones who are being bullied. You reach out to the ones who are considered the bad guys. You reach out to them and love them in my name all the same. Because we've had enough of the brokenness in this world and enough of the hate. And if I am going to shove back that stone and you're going to meet me, It's because the life I have to share can't just be celebrated on a Sunday morning. It has to be lived through living stones and taken out into the world. If you feel you don't have that place, remember the woman who was to be stoned. Remember my words, said Jesus. Let the one who is without sin cast the first stone. And if nobody else is there to judge you, neither do I. Folks, we may feel blank, looking at the world and wondering how empty it is of any hope. But our hope is that that tomb was empty. And our hope is that Jesus is working right now to roll back any stone between you and that good news. And maybe you will see him, and maybe you will only hear those words. Go and tell others he goes before you. And he will meet you. Everybody must get stoned. But the good news today is everybody's stone will also be rolled back by nothing you or I could do, by the grace of God, who lives and stands ready to give us new life too. Amen.